That is one of the most important wins Arteta has ever had as Arsenal manager. It's one of the most important wins for Arsenal in many, many years in the Premier League as well, because they showed so much character to get into a game where they were drawing at half-time. The pressure was on, the minutes were creeping up in the second half, and Kai Havertz pops up with his 4th goal in 4 games, which is an amazing run based on where he started his time at Arsenal. Great goal-scoring form, and Arsenal, crucially, have shown incredible mentality, the mentality of champions. We'll talk about all the goals, obviously the Aaron Ramsdale mistake as well, and observations of all the players that played for Arsenal. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. We'll be reacting to the huge game at Anfield, obviously coming up. Let me know your thoughts down below. Let's just start off with how Arsenal began the game. I thought they were absolutely exceptional in the first half. They controlled the game through and through. At points they had 70% possession. And Declan Rice was dictating play. His freed up role ahead of Jorginho is exceptional. It allows him to be more of a Frank Lampard type than, you know, a Gareth Barry type is what I called him in the summer. Because he was so defensive at West Ham. He was so side to side because he was so limited. At Arsenal, he's been able to flourish. He was whipping corners in incredibly well. He's got an underrated right foot in terms of adding bend and whip into corners, into crosses. And obviously the ball comes in and he scores a great header as well. He is an all-round world-class midfielder. I've had a few debates on Twitter as of yet saying he's not even as good as someone like Chouameni. He is right at the top of the game. He'd improve Bayern Munich, he'd improve Man City, he'd improve Real Madrid. He's world-class, and Arsenal are very lucky to have him at £100 million. He is so well-rounded. He's got a bit of the Gerrards about him. He's got a bit of the Frank Lampards about him. But he reminds me of an Arsenal great. He reminds me of Patrick Vieira, leggy. He's got so much energy. An underrated quality of his is that he, it sounds ridiculous, he can run at 8 out of 10 speed. He's not always sprinting, of course not. But he can run at those kind of high-intensity 8 out of 10 runs, whether he's pressing, whether he's got the ball. He's got the fitness to be at 8 out of 10 speed almost all game. He barely gets substituted. He barely doesn't play a minute of football for Arsenal. So his fitness is completely underrated. He absolutely dominated that midfield in the first half and scored an absolutely beautiful goal for Arsenal, where I think everyone thought it was going to be 3 or 4-0. Brentford offered nothing. Ivan Toney and Visa did not look like a connection or a partnership that could ever hurt Arsenal on the break. And then Aaron Ramsdale gets a ball passed back to him. I think it's from Kirior. The ball is absolutely fine. I'm seeing a few things on Twitter, maybe that the ball back was a little bit slow or whatever. Ramsdale makes a calamitous mistake. I don't think he can ever start for Arsenal in the Premier League again. I don't think he can ever start for Arsenal in the Champions League. These games are getting too big. I don't think he'll be there next season either. And these cup games for Arsenal, they're getting too big. They've got an opportunity to win serious silverware this season. Obviously, he's not going to play in Porto. And obviously, with David Raya back now that he can play against everyone else except Brentford, I don't see a world where Aaron Ramsdale even plays a game for Arsenal ever again this season. I think the games are far too important. And we have to talk about the mistake. It is embarrassing. I'm sorry. There's a reason that Aaron Ramsdale was at the bottom end of the Premier League for multiple years with Sheffield United, with Bournemouth. Of course he's got talent. Of course he's got talent. Loads of keepers at that age have, you know, to be doing what he was doing at that age, of course he had a lot of talent. He's obviously spent a lot of time in lower level football as well. And that's where I think he is. I think he's some keepers are just meant to be big fish in small ponds. Maybe it reminds me a little bit of Tim Howard at Man United. You know, very different characters, different players, but Tim Howard had a vibe, had a personality that I think carried him through a little bit. But at Man United, the level wasn't there until Van der Sar came in. He couldn't take it off. I think it was Roy Carroll and Benitez and players like that. Barthez, sorry. And he was a good keeper, Premier League legend, Tim Howard, but never good enough for Man United. And Ramsdale, for me, is I could see him playing 500 games for Everton or 400 games for Everton. Do you know what I mean? I could see him at that level. I could see him at 300 games for Nottingham Forest. I could see him 150 games for Aston Villa, as an example club. You know, they're in the Premier League, just pushing for Europa League. That's about it. West Ham, something like that. He isn't an Arsenal keeper. If Arsenal want to be winning the Premier League, I mean, David Seaman, one of the great keepers of all time in the Premier League era, 98 double winner. He wouldn't lace David Seaman's boots. this is the reality. And in modern football, we like to be generous and talk about building players up. And who am I to say? I've never kicked a ball in my life at the professional level. I just sit here, and I think every rival fan would want Ramsdale in goal. Whereas I think if Ortega comes in for Man City or Kelleher comes in for Liverpool, yes, there's a drop-off. Yes, there's an opportunity there when Kelleher plays instead of Alisson, for example. But the drop-off isn't near enough. And that is where Ramsdale suffers, in my opinion. Concentration isn't good enough in big moments. And he could have single-handedly cost Arsenal 2 league titles in a row. We'll talk about in a minute why that wasn't the case. But for me, if I was Arteta, he wouldn't play for Arsenal again. And maybe that's ruthless, but Arsenal are meant to be a big club. They're meant to be a big club. So let me know what you think in the comments down below about Aaron Ramsdale's performance. Second half. We have to talk about the Ivan Toney chance on his left foot. He slices a ball beautifully. It kind of floats over. You know he takes Aaron Ramsdale by surprise. Aaron Ramsdale almost rolled around like a WWE wrestler, celebrating, fist pumping. I think he has no idea of subtlety in how anything happens in the world. He has no idea that Ivan Toney took a snapshot at a weird angle, like half volley. He could have easily messed that up and it could have gone for a throw-in. These guys are taking shots at you like that because they think you're rubbish. Like they do. They think you're not good enough. And they think they can do that to you. So again, fist pumping, man. What are you doing? Don't do anything. Don't do anything. You don't need to do anything, honestly. I find it really frustrating with Aaron Ramsdale. He's a vibe hire, lads. He's a vibe hire. Arsenal really struggled in that first 35 minutes of the second half. And that's down to, Brentford really woke up. Brentford really found a little bit of a connection between, obviously, Ayer and Collins were looking a lot stronger than they were in the first half. And Vizza and Toney did a lot more work up top as well and really stretched the game and were a counter-attacking threat. And this is where you have to, Arsenal last season in the first 10 minutes of a second half, if they're trailing or if they need to get back in a game, there's a world where they just can't find the rhythm. They have all the talent in the world, but they can't find that deep kind of resilience. And this season they can, because they've got players that have got clutch goals in them. We've seen Declan Rice do it in last minute winners this season, and Kai Havertz has done it 4 goals in a row now in the last 4 games. Absolutely huge. It's a great header. I've criticised him in the air many times. I've thought he's not quite good enough for his height, for how he is in the air, no question. And the header is absolutely beautiful. So you have to give Arsenal credit. You have to give Arteta credit on some level, don't you? Because he sat there and said, in crunch moments against the likes of Brighton, against the likes of Southampton, against the likes of West Ham last season, we couldn't get past drawing some of those games. We couldn't score big moments where the likes of Solskjaer used to do it for Man United, for example. Maybe Michael Owen did it for Man United against Man City in the 4-3. Examples like that. Maybe we don't have those clutch players. Jesus is a fantastic finisher. Saka's a fantastic finisher. But Arteta's clearly addressed an issue in the Arsenal side where they don't have this kind of clunky, Inzaghi-like. He's a little bit like Inzaghi in terms of a clunky forward that can kind of get in between the lines and confuse opposition and score a goal out of nowhere when they look like they're not going to do anything all game. Kai Havertz, honestly, if he hadn't scored the goal, I think had an average performance. I think Arteta, going back to the point, Arteta's addressed the fact that he's got lots of fancy footballers in his side, but he hasn't got many that can just get these clutch moments out of nowhere. And Kai Havertz has got that in the locker. He is a unique player. He's a player that I don't particularly would want to pay to watch. I think he's a trope of modern footballers where kind of they're a jack of all trades, master of none, and they don't bring any aesthetic quality to the game of football, in my opinion. And Kai Havertz is one of them. But he still scores clunky goals. And it's huge. Arsenal didn't have that player last season. Arteta's brought him in, and they're challenging for the Premier League title. If Liverpool Man City drop points, obviously in a draw situation, Arsenal have put themselves in the position to be top of the table coming into the international break, coming into the City game, where they can now go to the Etihad and give themselves a platform to win. How bad would it have been? How much criticism would be levied at Arsenal if for all the away games where they're winning 5s and 6-0s, they can't win at home to Brentford because of a setback, which is obviously because of their own keeper. So it says a lot about where Arsenal have come as a side. They've got a lot more experience. They knock it around far smoother when they're drawing, when they need to win, when they're chasing a game. They knock it around as if they're winning 4-0 all game, which is a massive testament to the coaching staff at Arsenal. It really is. They have this kind of, they have an aspect to them where they are a little bit more calm and collected than they were last season, and that is down to Mikel Arteta. Let's just run through the players. Obviously, Aaron Ramsdale for me. Final game for Arsenal is curtains for Aaron Ramsdale. Ben White, the ball in for Kai Havertz was absolutely exceptional. It really was. He's been superb, Ben White. He's been resilient. I can't think of a single mistake he's made. He has to be going to the Euros, 1,000,000%. But the ball whipped in was delectable, and he's been doing it all season really. His distribution as a centre-back playing at right-back is very, very good. Saliba and Gabriel were fantastic today. Kirill underrated. I think he's going through the season quite well. Made a little mistake against Vizza. I think got beat on the line and nearly cost Arsenal early in the first half. But ultimately, Kirill has definitely found his place in the side and could offer a lot of defensive solidity if Arsenal needs to shut up shop in games and have 4 physical units at the back, like Man City had last season. I think the jewel in the crown for this Arsenal side is the midfield. I think they've figured it out 1,000,000%. Jorginho was good in this game. He linked up play well. He finds the right pass at the right time. He can open a side up with one pass. And he gives a lot more control in that midfield. He lets Declan Rice and Odegaard do their thing. Odegaard a little bit quiet today. He's one of those players I think that if you don't notice him, he's not really having a good game. Some players can have good games and you don't notice them. For me, Odegaard, if you can sit there and you can't think of one big thing he's done all game. For me, didn't have the best game, but that's to be expected. These guys are playing a lot of football. Declan Rice was absolutely superb. He is so athletic, so quick. He is the Patrick Vieira that came from, where did he come from? He came from West London. Yeah. The front three, I think Trossard struggled today. There was a moment where he was through on goal and he doesn't have that acceleration. He doesn't have that raw pace. He doesn't have that danger about him. I think he's a fantastic squad player. I think he's the first name off the bench in an ideal world. But I think the Brentford back 5 were okay with Trossard. But Saka and Havertz today were a handful. Hard to pick up, lots of mobility. Saka was causing all sorts of mischief, let's be completely real. And as I said, Havertz was absolutely electric. What can I say? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Would really appreciate your take on this game. Lots of drama. It is very, very big for Arsenal, no question. Yeah, very keen to see what you think in the comments down below. And make sure you subscribe. Liverpool City coming up.